in case.
Okay, let me bring up. So many of you have already signed up for the Illustrate a Recipe with Barbara Roth. She's a San Diego area artist, not a calligrapher, but we can do our own calligraphy and just she'll walk us through making pictures. And while I actually don't have any plans to illustrate a recipe, I want to do an illustrated letter. I like to write letters, so I'm going to play with that. So it's a fun one, and it's online and it's recorded. So, and then we have another, there's more things listed here, other groups. Dorothy Yuki will be teaching a book for solar nibs. This one with Robbie is in person. That's the way he teaches. Okay, this one will be online. Or Yukimi, and she just sent me all the rest of the paperwork tonight. So I will make it a point to get that opened this weekend at the very late. I mean, earlier if possible. So, and she sent me more pictures of different variations on the book. And so it's based on the form of O. She's got a variation that she uses. We come up with our own. And then I think originally we were going to come up with our own alphabet, but I think she said she'll provide one. So we have a choice, use hers or provide hers. And that'll be online. And it is for 4 Saturday mornings. It took me a while to get those. With our 7 chapters, it took a while to get those dates. And let's see, do I have any others listed? I'm working on quite a few. So if they're not posted yet, they will be. Let me see. Yeah, no, they aren't yet. So I'm going to stop the share. I'm waiting. So we do have both. We have some teachers that'll be coming that only teach in person, or their class that they're going to teach is just easier in person. But we have quite a few online ones also. So I will send out announcements when those are ready. And let me start talking about this. And I'm going to put on my desk camera. You know, before I get started, do we have anyone that wants to share their whirl from last week? I think maybe the person who told me they wanted to share theirs. I don't know if she's here yet. So I don't remember exactly who told me. So let me just go into what we're going to do tonight then. So actually I have this planned over 3 weeks, and sorry, I'm letting people in at the same time. Since Wendy's leaving tomorrow, she's not my...
You want me to do that, Kristi?
Excuse me?
Do you want me to do that for you?
Can you do that?
Yeah, it's not hard.
Let me give you access.
Okay, just to help you, just in case.
Thank you. Just let people in.
Yep.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
And then I won't need to do that. Okay, so I have this planned as a 3. Let me spotlight myself. 3-month session, a 3-session project. So what inspired me was some things we've already studied and a picture that I came across in Letter Arts Review. Wow. So I saw this and I thought how fun this is, what the Romans were doing. And we could do something. It's going to be up to us what we want to do. I have some others. Okay, so then we had the lesson with, so this, let me just say, give credit where credit is due. This is Peggy Timmerman, and she calls it a phenology tapestry, and she's got scientific names listed for flowers on a prairie. And she's from Wisconsin. So I just saw that and I thought, wouldn't that be fun? And that could be done, I thought, with either pen, brush, or it could be drawn. This to me looks like it's done with a pen, but I could see, I think we could choose what we wanted to do. But we also had variations, so.
You could use the Kemper tool, Kristi, too.
Did I miss, Susan, did you say
You
something?
could use the Kemper tool as well.
Yeah, it reminds me of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
thing we already learned.
Yeah, Nancy Hayes Hills. You
Yeah.
could,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah.
Kristi, could you show us the issue that it's out
Yeah,
of?
it's the latest one I got, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. 39.4. And it's got, this caught my eye. It's got these great Romans on the front. And then I came across the other one. It just caught my eye because it was so colorful. Here's Yukimi's bowls. So once they changed from John Neal, it took me a few years to get around to renewing. I know it's always got great stuff, but then several friends were featured in a few issues back. So I renewed, and this is expiring, but I've just renewed again. It's got such great inspiration. And then we had this one that we did with Mina Taylor. This was my draft I did during, well, just what I did during class. And it was done with a glazed pen. So all these, I'm looking at letters that have more substance to them, not just skeleton, could be done the way that one I just showed is done, or the way this is done. I could see this with broad edged letters.
What is a glaze pen?
Well, I probably shouldn't talk too much about it because it seems to have been discontinued. Right when Mina taught that class, everybody had trouble getting them, and luckily I ordered mine early, and then they kind of were out of it. So it's made by the same company as Jelly Roll, but
Oh yeah, okay.
really raised. They called it its nickname was a stained glass pen. It was raised and it just had a nice look to it. But really, those who couldn't find the glazed version or you could use a Jelly Roll, a black Jelly Roll. It just doesn't have, this is shiny. The lettering is, the ink is shiny and a little bit raised, more so than the Jelly Roll. I think the Jelly Roll is probably more matte. I don't use those that often, but. And
Kristi,
that's too bad because the San Fernando group has another artist that they ask to teach quite often. They have Nancy Hayes Hills, but they have another artist, and I can't think of her name right now. She's from Texas, and she used the glazed pen a lot. So I guess everyone will have to switch to something different.
Kristi.
Excuse me?
Yeah, Kristi.
Yeah.
I got something called 3D Jelly Creative Pen.
Can I spotlight you?
Yeah, sure.
Just a minute. Replace spotlight. Okay. 3D Jelly. I wonder if we have those here. We'll have to.
I got
look
them on
into that.
Amazon.
Yeah. Okay. We'll look into it. Thank you.
No worries.
And the thing was, when we were looking for this, we were able to find those pens, but you had to buy 20 and we only wanted black. So we'll have to look at the brand you're showing, because I didn't want the colors. I only wanted black. I have enough pens I don't use. I also came across this and I didn't want to share it because it's Eliza. I mean, I didn't want to send it out. It's Eliza Holidays. I know a lot of people, when they do classes, they send out work from other instructors, but I just, I just don't feel real comfortable doing that. Let me just get something out of my way on my screen. Okay, so this is hers. And I want to point out so here I found this in an old Speedball book. And I thought, okay, this is a good basic, and then we can modify it however we want. This is Sho Card lettering. This was from 1962 Speedball textbook. But then I saw Eliza's, and it's thinner and taller. Here's the O from Speedball, and here's Eliza's. And Speedball also has they've got some narrower ones, but Eliza's are just more casual, I think, less precise and fun. And what had really inspired me was this book that I've got, and I bought it for the illustrations, but I do really like the book. It's just the basics for cooking, not recipes, just how to make your own recipes that are good. So, and one day I will read it, but I bought it for the pictures, and I love the lettering. And I was going to bring the book out here, but anyway, throughout the book, it is full of this same lettering, but maybe all the same color on one page, etc. Variations of this. And I bought this book on Amazon used, really good condition, very inexpensive. And I actually bought some for a friend who was making a cookbook for her children. I bought her this book so she could look at the drawings. So, but I thought we could start with this one, Speedball, and we can talk about the fundamentals, the basics that we need to know. So I played with this. It doesn't take that long to get up to speed. I'm not quite there yet, but I was looking much better after even just a couple hours of practice. So I'm going to go through, but my goal here is not to have perfect lettering. It's to understand how to draw monoline letters. And I thought we could start with pen. We can talk about the basics, and then we can go to brush the next week. And also I can imagine like these letters, I can imagine these being done with a B nib. They're squared off, but I can imagine them being done with a B nib. And then my thought is I'm just going to look at these and draw them. I'm not going to trace or anything, although I might just at first to get a handle on it. But I want to just, my end goal is to draw these. Okay, I'm on an old computer and I'm trying to move something out of the way. Okay, got it. All right, so I'm going to walk through these. And then I found this great page on spacing, and it made me think, I think I'm going to redo my spacing. Yvonne's mentioning that Amazon has those 3D pens, jelly 3D pens. So great, thanks, Yvonne. But when I did my spacing guide, I darkened this part and then showed the spacing in between. But I think it's so much easier. I like to do the red. Do I have a red pen sitting here? I had one. Although I think that was on my other table. I had the red pen. Let me get a red pencil. So I had talked about how you can take the spacing and you just go up 45 degrees from the center. And that's your spacing between the letters. And I just think it's so much clearer showing the spacing in between rather than the way I did it. So I'll be working on maybe modifying my spacing handout before the next time. Admit someone. Okay, so I'm gonna get started. And what I have to say is, if you've done Monoline before, you know it's not necessarily easy to get those round, the squares, the straight lines are not too hard, but to do the circles is the curves is not so easy. And so what I'm doing, if I were doing Monoline, I would be working to do it to keep my page straight and make the letter. But for these, just getting the understanding of the proportions, and I'm going to show different proportions. We're going to do, here's these proportions, but these are thinner and these are even thinner. So this is just to go over these proportions. And the other thing I noticed, I gave you the handout again, the usual one that I do for traditional proportions, but these proportions on here are not necessarily, they're close, it's a good guideline, but they are not necessarily the same. I think this M, I measured it, it's taller than it is wide. And if you look at traditional spacing, they're a little wider than tall. So it's that kind of thing that is not exactly the same. So what I thought, we'll go over these, but really do what you want. The end goal is for us to do some letters that we can have casual and come up with some fun piece. And I would like to challenge everyone to work towards making a piece. Okay, so I've got this handout. And I've got my grid paper, and I do like to do pencil lines to kind of give me a guide. After you've done a lot of practice, you can do these without all these guides, but I just do better. And so I came up with I've got them, I did my pen widths, and I'm using this green. I did several. I'm using this green and around 5, but I like it, personally, I like it a little taller. I don't know, I'll play with it, and I'll do some tall, some shorter, and play with it. So here's my first one, really bad lettering. These were my first tries. So the A looks okay, but the curves were really a problem, a lot of practice. And they get easy. Look at those O's, how those come out. You need a lot of practice on those. And I think the narrow ones are much easier. So I'm going to start with A, and I'm just going to do, and these are monoline, so we're not working at a slant, except that. And while I did draw lines, I'm not going to worry about exactly fitting those. I'm just going to do letters that I find pleasing. And what's nice is this is for a brush, and it really shows you the overlaps of the letters. That's very helpful for drawing them. I didn't always follow it. I found some easier ways for myself. But if we were, I did take a sign painting class at one of the conferences, and if we were doing sign lettering, we would definitely follow those just the way they are. And this needed to be very readable because they were in store windows, on inside stores. This was their way they priced things, etc. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt. I'm going to just check the chat. Okay, that was about the jelly pens.
Christi, is this close though to what we would do with Neuland?
Excuse me, Susan, can you talk a little?
Neuland lettering, similar?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. The curves
Okay.
and all would be done similarly. I
So the difference with this is that it's a taller than maybe what Neuland would be, or?
Yeah, these are definitely are taller than
Yeah.
Neuland. And you start here with a slant, where Neuland, when we did it,
Right.
I
at
had
the-
different classes where we did them different ways, but one was you start here and you work your way around.
Yeah,
There was others where we kind of pieced them, but not this way. But
yeah.
these are made to go with a brush, so
Yeah.
they are different. And Neuland was cut. It was not a calligraphy hand. And then from the cut prints, people came up with the calligraphy version.
Okay, well, that's interesting, right? It's as close, but not. So we'll watch it work.
Hey,
then.
Susan, some people come across really loud, but I can't hear you as well. So when you talk, if you can talk louder,
Okay, I will.
it's not all that clear.
All right.
Okay, so then
Okay,
I've
thank
got the B. And what the other thing I noticed about this is, especially these narrows, they're really close together because this is advertising. They didn't want to waste a lot of space. So many of our Romans, we space them far apart, but we're here to conserve space. So we're not going to put a lot of distance. And these are narrower. There would be less distance. They didn't give a sample of the word written with the full letters. And I'll say I have problems with these curves, so I am going to draw myself a little guideline. And the other thing I wanted to really emphasize, that's why I thought I'd go through this with pen first and next time with brush. Look at these counter spaces. That's how you know when you're not doing it correctly. You look at those counter spaces. And I looked at my original, my first time I'm trying it. And then I look, here's the P, and look how different the counter space of the R is. And they are different on the sheet. But I'm looking at the B and I'm seeing that's too short of a counter space. So I made it wider the next time. But really, it's even wider than that. So this, and I tried measuring these letters and marking spaces that fit the measurements on these, and it did not look the same with the counter spaces. So this is just play around with it. So, and the way I did some of these, I did them differently. Some of these I did them with starting halfway. I'll show some like that, but some of these I just went like I went and I turned the paper. This is not, I'm not going to be lettering a show card. So my goal here is just to learn about these, and I do a better job for learning when I just play with them and not worry about how a big bunch of text will be written. Although I should think about it, because and what's nice about this being done with a brush is you can see where they overlapped, etc., if you want to do that. And I don't have the greatest manual dexterity for doing these curves. what I'm doing now is I'm comparing, and you can see these are a little pointier than mine. Mine are very rounded. This one, maybe not so much, but this one is not as pointy as this one. So I could have come out further. So that's what I did yesterday, is I played with these and then I did them again. And this one I would do again. But what I'm learning here is I'm not going to copy this letter. If I copy any letters, I will copy this one. And I'm not going to trace it. I'm just going to copy it and make it my own. That's for the final third week. We'll play with drawn letters. And then the C, that's where it came, the regular proportions come into effect. I did, I want to do a close to a square. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tall. So I will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I'm going to go one less than 6 for a C. And to help myself, I did dots. This is the high point. If this were a full square, this would be halfway. This is halfway. And I want my rounds not to, I did not do a good job when I drew these during my practice. I did not do a good job of rounding these. So I did find it helpful to sketch it in first, but I will say they didn't always come out regardless. It's practice. I did practice, they were better, but to really get good at this, you'd have to do a lot of it, and it will be easier with a brush. So that's when we'll really work on so this one, if you look at what they did for showing the strokes, and I am going to turn this. And then here, I'm going to go back over it. And at the end, it just goes down to a point. Okay, so you can see curves are not easy. I had some better ones on the narrower ones, but curves are really hard. And I always found monoline kind of hard too. But those are short and wide, and we did a lot more writing with them. So if you did a lot of writing with this, you would get it, but do we want to? I think we really would rather focus on practicing with the brush, but just work on the proportions. Okay, and I'm not going to go through every single one of these. I'm going to skip around because I want to show some the narrow ones. Those are what I really liked. You'll pick what you really like. I'm going to show a G, which is pretty much well, you know what? I'm just going to do the G on top right here. So it comes up here to half, comes down, and then about halfway in. And I didn't come up far enough. Look at that. And this is a much taller letter on here, much taller. I'm doing a shorter version. So it's looking at the counter spaces. So let's say I'm going to do maybe to here. And I think I'll do it to here. I'm going to do it over. And I could have marked the halfway point. I didn't. So it's like do a C. And now I need to get this monoline, so I'm gonna start where I had it thinner. You can see it comes down a little bit. And then I'm gonna come up. And then over from halfway. So that's a little closer, but really, these are taller letters than I'm making. And I think what I did when I was practicing, I had several pens here. I switched. I have a pink one that I sometimes switch to this, the 3.0. I'm using right now the 3.8. I'm going to switch now to the 3.0. The blacker one. I want to use one that's dark. I think I'll use walnut. Okay, I don't think I need to show the E, except E is usually about a half space, but if compare this E to the O, that is not just a half space. Measure that, it's 3/4. Well, actually this is 1.5, so it is a half space. Just doesn't look like it to me. So E and F go a half space. H, I'm just going to start drawing these. And I really, the way I liked doing these is just drawing them, see how they look. If I didn't like it, I drew it again. And look at the H. So now it's too tall. I'm using a smaller pen. But what I looked at is you've got your 2 strokes, and this one in the middle is wider, a wider counter space than the middle. I'm going to make this one smaller. And I'd probably do this, and I'll decide it should be even smaller, shorter, I should say. But I like that. I like the taller. The one that I really liked was this style, and it's taller and slimmer. So this is pick what you like. I did go through, I tried to replicate these first, but then I'm just picking what I like. And here's the eye, which of course we don't worry about. And I should put some padding under this. Okay. J. So this is, if you look at this, this will come down. And then it'll come around and they'll come back. And that's the way we would normally do these. But not all these letters are done the way we'd normally do them. And what I noticed, the K is done very different than any K I've done. Comes way down here and then here. And I can look at the counter space. That is a taller, slimmer letter than this one. So when I was practicing, I just played around and made them more to my liking. And do touch up. And if you look at this exemplar, they show doing touch up. Here's this N, and here's the brush going across the end of it to clean it up. So the M That was a tricky one. So come down. And then depending on how wide you want to make it. As I said, these aren't the typical proportions. And then you can look, it shows how they did the brush marks. And then I can clean it up like they would with a brush or not. Okay. And if you look at the N, usually an H and an N are often similar widths. I think this N is a little fatter, and I'm pretty sure I measured it last night. Yeah, so this is about 17/16, and this is 14/16 or 15/16. So they're not worrying about having perfect Roman proportions on these. You just want it to look good. And when they were doing these show cards, they're running through them quickly. You, of course, did want to know how to use this and do the proportions properly. But if he doesn't have it in the textbook, all the same widths, he's not worried about the traditional spacing. And I'm looking at, so here's the H and here's the N, and they're both 3/4 letters in traditional, but they're not too worried. Now this O, this is not easy. I had much better luck with the narrower O, but I am going to just do one here. And basically I turned the paper to get this, and I marked the centers to make it easier for myself. And I could even just help myself with the curves. This is just while we're practicing. You wouldn't do this in the future. What we want to do is eventually come up with letters we like, and then we can use them as a model for drawing. So you look at their O, and you can look at the Q and see how they did these. So I'm going to start right here, and I'm going, and one thing I need to mention, let me come down and stop, and then this O is wider than it is tall. And I wasn't taught that initially. It was Reggie Zell that talked about you made them wider than taller for optical reasons. I've had maybe one other person teach that way. So it's not a universal, but here it's used there, wider than tall. And so I did I'm going to just come around now. Okay, as I said, these curves are not easy to make with a pen. They will be much better with a brush, which we'll do next time. I think that O is even, well, it's even more lopsided than my first O that I did when I was just starting. And then you can do your Q, which basically for this one just came out and you can look at the counter space. But again, this is what you want to have. It doesn't have to be an exact replica of this. So I'm going to do the P. That's where I really found it helpful to do the counter spaces. So I am going to just draw a few squares for my P just to give me some guidelines while I'm getting started. after I've done this a few times, I don't necessarily need, and I'm looking at that counter space. So I can be looking at this left edge of the pen and say, that's what I want. So even though I drew that grid line, I'm not necessarily following it. I'm looking at this counter space. So that I would practice that a few times before I'd put it on anything I cared about with pen, but it will be easier with brush. And then the R is different. And I'm just going to draw those grid lines just to give me a little crutch, but I won't necessarily follow them exactly. So here's the R. And you can see it just comes out further, and it doesn't come as low as with the P. So I'm going to actually draw that in so I can, and it needs to come out far enough so I get a pointier counter space than the P. This is kind of vertical and this is more horizontal, the counter space. So I am going to draw that coming out further, and it only comes about halfway down, and then there's the leg, which should end up this is really too far, but the leg should end up even with the outer edge. So here goes. I'm looking at that counter space as I'm drawing, and that's how I'm adjusting and not exactly following the lines I drew. I'm trying to get that same counter space, and it's a little wider at the tip where in here it's a little pointier, but I'm getting closer. It doesn't look just like the P. And then I'm going to come out here and I'm going to end this either just even with the outside of that curve or past it. So definitely this would be one I would do again a few times, because you can see it's pretty flat looking. It doesn't have the rounding that it should have. It should come in here. And maybe what I could do is actually draw that counter space. Let me see about that. I want this to just get thinner towards the end, not just flat. So I'm going to try that again. It's still a little, looks kind of like a bullet. So that'll take a few times to practice. And I have to say, this was tremendously hard. It was not too bad doing the narrower version. This was very doable. This one, I really had some pretty ugly S's. But I'll make an attempt. And look how wide that is. I don't think I'll make mine that wide because I know I had real problems with it. And I'm just going to draw. I found it helped me to draw it in. And when you do the bottom will come out past that bowl on the top, and the top will stop short of the bowl on the bottom. So here we go. Little touch up. Okay, as I said, this one is really hard. It's much easier when we do a narrower version. So we'll do that. Okay, and then a couple things I'll just point out. V. A lot of times a W is 2 V's, but look at that counter space there and look at it here, it's smaller. So when you do the W, it's 2 smaller V's. So I'm just going to draw, I'm not going to draw grid lines, I'm just going to do a V. Okay. And then the W will be, and what I noticed is this is at more of an angle than this is. So I will make the outer line more like the V. And then this won't be quite as slanted as the V. So you can see that's smaller. And then I try to do a similar slant coming down and then try to mirror that outer. So that came, I mean, it's ugly and messy, but it came out okay. And I'll say when I did these in black, you didn't see all the shading and all. So if you're doing in black, it should look better. Okay, I'm gonna use the green again, just make it a little bigger. And so basically, I found these easier. And I can do those later, but I did find them easier than the letters. I think because we don't normally draw them this way. These are, and so it was easier to follow. But first I want to do some of the narrower letters. Any questions, comments before we go on to making them narrower? So I did this one first, and I'll do a couple narrower that way, but these are the ones when they got this narrow, I really like them. And if I look at this and I put my green in there, that's a good width. If I put it on this H, I think I thought that the pink was a little closer. Let me try the pink. Yeah. So the pink is actually that width. And this, look at how that is even less wide. It's the strokes are narrower on that. Oh, so I don't know if they were using narrower brushes or if they were holding them more at an angle. But that would be something to play with. I'm going to work on, let me just do an O. And it's still not easy, but I did find it easier than the, and I found this one was, well, let's see, it was not, it looked a little better when you did the really smaller one. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to mark my center spots. And I'll even sketch it in. And we were talking about Neuland. I think some of the Neuland classes I took, we even had kind of a point at the top of the O, but this definitely does not have a point. So we will go, and if you look at his, they start at an angle. I'm just bringing mine around. I'm off my padding, and then I come around this way. And I think I'll just turn it a little bit when I get here. That's where it's really hard. And that's where a brush will be much easier. And let's see, so when I did these, yeah, and so I had some pretty ugly versions too of the even that narrow. Okay, and here's the T and the H. And it's a little bit wider in the center, but you know, it's getting pretty close. For the narrower letter, it's not much wider than a stroke. And I noticed it's a little higher. The crossbar on the narrower version is a little higher than center. Okay. So I do find those easier, and I'm not doing them. Theirs are just so precise for it, it's their textbook. I'm not worrying about having them so precise. I think they have more life to them when you do the, especially the straights. Those are easier to do. The curves are what we really have to practice to get those. I'm gonna do now the narrower, the Sho Card, the narrower S. And usually when I would do that, a lot of times if I were doing a traditional S, traditional Roman S, I would have two circles. I'm going to draw this in so that I can have more of a line to follow. And then the top. Okay. A little bit easier, but still lots of practice needed. I spend a few hours practicing, but obviously more is needed. And then this one, look how close, these are narrow letters. Look how close they are on the exemplar. Just a little space in between. And if you look at this H, that line in between is even smaller than the two strokes. The counter space is even smaller. So I'm going to do that. And for this one, they had the crossbar at the bottom. It could be obviously at the top too. And then here is so what I did when I did this small O, I found mine was a little too wide. And really, as I mentioned, it looked to me like they used a smaller pen. I'm going to use the same pen. And I'm going to just give myself some guidelines. And this is half height, and then you have this triangle. And so let me just draw that in. And I want this to be more of an oval. So when I did my initial practicing, I had that too wide. So I am going to try to keep it narrow. And again, look at the counter space. I do have, I think not, my pen is a little too big, so I expect I'll have a smaller counter space, but let's just go and see. And I'm gonna start here. No, I didn't have a smaller counter space. So there's the O. And then they have this triangle, which basically just plant your left tine, your left side of the tines, and just turn it. And it should have been closer. And you can draw it to set it up. I had such a nice one when I did my first one. So that's, I think what I should have done was drawn where it would be located. So let me do that right here. I'm going to want this to be about like that. And maybe because that's I'm going to do with a green pen because it is taller. And then you can just point it a little and you come up with a nicer. Okay, so some things to look at on this. Just continuing, I'm not going to go through every letter. I'm going to talk more about spacing, etc. I'm going to point out, so here's your R for their main sample. And those little lines in there are just lines I drew for myself to compare. Look at this one. Look how vertical that is compared to how horizontal that counter space on the R is. And look at this line. Look how low, this comes very low. And so you have a much shorter counter space on the bottom. You can see the A, it's a narrower, so it's definitely a different silhouette, but the crossbar is lower comparatively. It's about 3/4 down, where this is just below half. So what I get from this is they've got their main basic hand, and then they don't hesitate to make changes, especially if you're doing a show card. You don't want every word to look exactly the same. So you would probably have some words done this way, but then you would have this to add interest to the page, just like these add interest to this page, having the different shapes of the letters on one show card. And while some of us who do pointed pen or we might just do pointed pen to have contrast from this. But back then, those sign painters, well, some of them had some brush cursive, but a lot of times what they used were the smaller versions and variations. they did have pointed brush scripts also for sign painters. So any questions about this? Hopefully yours are looking better than mine. I thought mine looked better yesterday at the end of the day, but not so much today. But with a lot of practice, we could have some pretty good letters, especially once we move to the brush. And next week or next month, I will share some tips for writing these with the brush. I did take a sign painting class. It was in Montreal at that conference, but I also took brush lettering with John Stevens and got some very good tips there also. So I'll share those. And I do think the brush is easier to work with. You just have to be careful what writing medium you use, because it can, if the paper's too smooth, brush writing doesn't necessarily look that great. Once you have toothy paper and a thick writing medium, it can look pretty good. Okay, any questions before we just talk some more about spacing?
This is Debbie. I have a question.
Sure.
Whenever I heard anyone talk about show cards,
Yes.
where I got your handout here, I
Yeah.
thought it was SHOW.
You know, but that is the term for a show card. This is the name of this hand. He named this show
Oh,
card. So so when I was trying to look up samples for this, I did look up show card spelled as you put it, but his is spelled with just an O. And so
like I've never even seen show card written, but like I've heard, calligraphers talk about them and seen people show examples of them. I'm like, oh, they look so cool. But and I'm like, oh my God, there's no W on there even. I'm so
yeah,
confused.
so there is a W for the term show card, but
Okay.
this particular script or
Gotcha.
hand is called show with just an O.
Okay, glad I asked. Okay, thanks.
Mhm. Yeah, there are sign painting books and all, and they definitely use the show as SHOW. But I think this was probably George. What's his last name? My mind just went blank. The speedball guy.
His last name is George. It's
Oh,
Ross
okay,
F.
Ross
George.
Yes, thank you. And I think he wrote most of these in the old speedball textbooks, and he gave his own names to make them stand out.
Yeah, these are definitely Ross George pages.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll talk about that's Meredith, right? Okay, so we're going to talk about spacing, and I really like his guide for spacing. What I really find very, very helpful is to look at spacing instruction from different instructors. So when I originally looked at Sheila Waters, I didn't get it. And then I looked at Annie Sakali, and I didn't necessarily get it, but when I compared, they did them a little differently. They were the same basic concept, but they had different ways of showing it. And when I looked at the two together, I was able to figure it out. And it really helped me when Jürgen Verkemps gave a lesson on it. Unfortunately, I studied with Peter Thornton, but not basic Romans. I studied the funky Romans with with Peter Thornton. So I never got the spacing, etc. with him, but Jürgen credits Peter, Susie Berenger credits Peter, Sherry Thornton credits him for what they learned. So I love looking at what the different instructors show. It makes it more clear. And I love the way he is showing this, because what I had learned from Susie and Jürgen was just when you're writing a word and you need to do your next word, and you can eventually you do this in your head, but to start with, we did it with a red pencil with Jürgen. And so you take the center point where the optical space ends, and you go up 45, and that's where the next letter starts. And so if the next letter were an O, then the next letter would start over here, as you can see. So here's your 45-degree angle, and this O overlaps because you don't have the space here. So you're compensating. So I love this, and I want to change my own exemplar for spacing to make it easier. What I learned from Sherry, from Susie Behringer, is she even uses that for getting the width of a letter. So if you're doing a C, was usually 3/4, close to, or 7/8 in that vicinity. So you'd start here and do your 45-degree angle, and that's how you get your width without having to use the grid. And you can do it at first with the red pencil, but eventually when you've done it enough, I did find I could space mine okay after I had been doing it this way. You've got to be in practice though. And so these are really great for when we're out of practice, because we write so many different hands now, and this spacing applies to italic, etc. If it's a narrower letter, you start at, let's say it's a half size letter. You're cutting all your letters in half, making them taller and thinner. Then you would start more at the 1/4 down and do your line, and you'd get different spacing for, as you can see, these are closer. They're narrower, they're closer. But what I see with, so here, look at all this space in here. But when you go over here, you're really jamming things together. Okay, any questions? So what I'd like to say for we've got a month, and next month we'll do brush lettering. And when I studied with Carl Roars, we did 1/2 inch. He liked the Winsor Newton brushes, and the smallest at the time was 1/2 inch. But I have found narrower brushes that work okay. But that is, especially sign painting brushes, you can find narrower ones, but you use whatever size brush you have, and you just make it tall enough to work with that brush. I like the small just because I can fit more on the page and practice more. And I will do a supply list for that and talk about the writing. You could do walnut ink, but it just, it's nice to have a little tension when you're writing with a brush. But one thing I started playing around with is I started looking at the letters I drew, and this is where, that I had written, this is where you can correct them. If we're doing drawing, I'm just coming down here and I'm drawing that letter that I just wrote, and then I'm doing it in pencil and I can correct it. And then later I can be doing it in a color of maybe watercolor or gouache, and I won't do that till I'm in practice and feeling comfortable with it. Or like this, what I love about this is these are drawn. She probably wrote them with watercolor, but maybe not. She might have drawn her outlines first and then painted them in. So we can do whatever works for us. draw and paint in, or write them with a brush with colored paint and then outline or not. The picture that I showed in Letter Arts Review was not outlined. Any questions, comments?
I have a question, Kristi.
Uh-huh.
Janice, I wonder if you could just write a word. I'm having a little bit of difficulty comprehending Susie Behringer, that technique that she used for spacing. So if you could
Yeah.
do a word, that would be helpful.
Yeah, usually I teach that in like October, but I'll go through it right now. Just quickly. I'm going to write Gothic because that's the one I was practicing. So I'm just going to go here and try to get my curves to look a little better. Okay, so what Susie had said is, let's say I just drew it, but
Mhm.
the next one I'll do with Susie's. So, and Jürgen was the one who taught me. So here's your spacing. These are narrower letters. So there's my spacing that I'm going to go with.
Okay.
So I would start up here because it's not a wide letter. So I'd start closer to the top and I'd draw a 45-degree angle, and that's where the letter should start. But the next letter is going to be O.
So how did you determine where that point was going to be that you started the next letter?
Okay, so if I were doing these full, if I were doing the full letters, it would be halfway.
Okay.
If I'm doing narrower letters,
Mm-hmm.
and this one, my G is not half, but it's getting closer to half. So I move up. I just move up between
Half and
the top and half. So I
Okay.
just moved up. And I'm eyeballing it because I didn't do this exactly 1/2. But if I had done a G that's 1/2,
Mhm.
so let me show you, here's a full G. It would be this wide,
Mhm.
okay? And if I wanted to do 1/2, it's gonna be this wide.
Mhm.
So for this one, if I were doing this width of a letter, I would start at 1/2. And I would come up 45 degrees and the letter would start there.
Okay.
But if I'm doing it this narrower letter, I would come up 1/2, 45 degrees, and the letter starts there.
Okay. So that would apply to the curve. So it would vary depending upon the letters.
No, it's exactly the same.
Okay.
So if this is a G or a C, see how the spacing overlaps? It's not with a straight letter, it's exactly butted up. But if it's a curve and you've got some space in there, it moves into the body of the letter. And that's where you can get Sheila's book. What is it called? Fundamentals of Calligraphy, Foundations of
Foundations.
Calligraphy.
Uh-huh.
You'll see the spacing. She does it for every letter.
Mhm.
And so I refer to hers for that, but I've done it enough now. I have a pretty good idea and see how it comes over. So let's say I did an O. Okay.
I
But
was just trying to find an easier way. You said this is an easier way than trying to remember the spacing that needs to go between these letters, the different
I
shapes.
find it, well, because the way I learned with other teachers, pretty much they just said straight lines are farther apart than
Yeah.
curved lines.
Right.
And that's all they told me. And I really never knew if I was spaced correctly. Well, this is something that's really clear to me. So if it's an O, see the O? here's your spacing right there. This is your spacing.
Mhm.
So I start right there at half and go up 45 degrees. And if I were going to do another O, let's say I'm going to do another O and it's going to be that same width. Well, you look at this, it comes over to here.
Mhm.
Doesn't the letter starts there, but it comes over to here because it's an O and it's got this space up here. And you have to play with this. Study Sheila's book. And if you have Annie's book, which, what was it? I don't remember what Annie's was called,
Okay. I have seen this.
but Annie's got her one book on, really had a good section on.
Mhm.
But see, here's your, let me get a different color. Here's your O, and it comes all the way over to here.
Mhm.
And now you're coming in with another O, and it comes all the way over to here. So you have this space between the two.
Right. So you still basically have to know the basic principles before you.
Yeah,
you
and that's why I would always refer to Sheila's book. Or I do have a spacing handout that I send in October when I teach that. And it will have all the spacing for all of them. But really, most of us have fundamentals, foundations of calligraphy from Sheila. But here you've got these. And
Yeah, that spells it out pretty nicely.
yeah, because you know what? These represent each kind of letter. So
Right.
if you look at the other letters, look at, these are two straights together.
Right, right.
It's showing you all the different, how the different combinations go together.
Okay. Right. I thought there might be an easier way than committing this to memory, but
Yeah, no,
if you
well,
get used to
you know what? It's not that we memorize it, you just do it enough and
Yeah.
it starts. Okay, here it is. Janet
Okay,
mentioned
that's right.
the other Jan. I'm talking to Janice, but Janet mentioned the art and craft of hand lettering is Annie Sakali's book.
Okay.
And Janice, the reason, see this L, you've got this space in here, it's because that bottom line takes up some visual space. So you have a little bit of a gap there. So it's, once you study Sheila's book and Annie's book, it becomes very clear.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward as far as that optical spacing obviously is better to the eye than the mechanical underneath it. So
Yeah. Yeah, so I just, when I'm practicing, I try to work with these just maybe in my head, or I draw the red lines, but then when you go to do a piece, it kind of has sunk in if you do enough practice on it.
yeah, I can see that. Thank you.
I think, as I've mentioned, a lot of our problems are we do so many different hands and we don't
Yeah.
get enough practice with any one hand.
That's true. Okay.
I'm kind of trying to make Romans and Cheryl's Gothic, my two hands that and italic really piggybacks on Romans, so you follow the same rules. So when you practice those different hands, then it should be, it sinks in.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and I have to say, this is our 39th session. So we've had quite a few sessions on spacing. If you're new, we'll start again in September. We'll do the foundations, the basic proportions, and then the next time we'll do spacing. We always start the calligraphy year off that way. But again, Sheila and Annie Sakali's book, and then this one. Now we've got this one too. I just love having all these different ways they're explained. Does anybody have anything they want to share? We have about 9 more minutes. So Susan, just a minute. Looks great. So we should all get a book like that and practice our,
Sorry.
and I do have one.
Well, no, but it was just doing kind of raising X height and then doing narrower to see,
Yeah.
what you were talking about. And it does make a difference. It looks better, I think, like you're saying.
I think the narrower is just much. It's,
Yeah.
well, especially after you do the wide first and then you do the narrow. I was pretty happy with some of my narrow after I wrote all those ugly wide ones. I got some decent narrow ones after that. So it's just practice.
Definitely pen manipulation.
Yeah, definitely. We're twisting. Well, and this really isn't made to be done with a pen. It's made to be done with brush. And we're just
I like lowering the crossbar down too. I thought that gave it something special. So that was a good idea.
or raising it.
Yeah.
Lowering it or raising it. They're just fun
Yeah.
to do. And the one thing, oh, now I turned off my camera, just a minute. Let me get it back on. Okay, look at it. He's got this H is lowered. Let me, the H is lowered and the A is lowered and the R is lowered. So that's the one thing we're often taught is if you lower one, do them all. Now there's different hands that are maybe more fun where you do some low, some high, but on more formal, you do them pretty much, keep them even. Okay, anybody else want to share? I know them when we first draw these, they look, okay, here's Margaret. They look pretty bad when we first draw these and they get better as we go along. Okay, great, Margaret.
Yeah, I've been doing this similar thing. I've been playing with the height.
Yeah.
So Margaret, you're also using a 4.5, right?
Yeah, I'm using a 4.5 at and that was at a 5mm square height.
Yeah, and I did play with mine. When I was practicing, I played with mine too.
I've gone down actually. I was just playing around with going back to the same pen, but at a smaller height. So, and then, yeah. So just playing around, like you said.
Thank you. So our purpose of doing this was not to be writing whole pages of letters with the broad edge pen. Our goal will be to draw them, but this is helping us understand the proportions, spacing, etc. Any other questions or anybody else have anything to show? Okay,
mine look terrible, but I'll be willing to show it to you.
Sure, thank you.
Hey,
You know, that didn't look
terrible.
You saw how terrible mine looked, so great.
Oh, yeah.
That does remind me of a page of Neuland or something because we have all those strokes. You can see the strokes coming into the stem, etc.
My hand is sore now, twisted.
So I was moving, in many cases, I was moving especially when I did the wider letters, I was moving the paper rather than trying to twist myself all totally around.
So
This has
Kristi,
been
when you're
fun.
talking,
Thank you so much.
if you're talking drawing, does that mean like an outline?
Yeah, well, no. So when I showed that page from Letter Arts Review, let me get that again.
Okay.
I'll just hold it up here. Now I've lost the page. Those I think were actually pen written. Well, we talked about the Kemper tool, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. Here, let me spotlight.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised at all if those were done with a Kemper tool, or they might be done with a folding pen. So we can play around with different things. And I also thought, like the salt and fat, I could see doing those with a B nib.
Yeah.
Some are squared off, but I could see coming up with your design with a B nib. That would be easier to write with than a broad edge. So what I'm saying is, let's pick what we want to do. There's these different techniques, and then there was the one from Mina, the technique that Mina showed us. And so we have these, but let's do them with a wide, give heft to them. Not, this is skeleton. We'll give heft to them.
Okay.
And you can either do pen if you don't want them to be too, I mean, like these, I could do these with a broad edge pen because they're narrow and the curves are gradual. So what I'm suggesting is we play around and we do what we want to do with all these. This
But,
just
but
really,
using
I
the
love
show
this.
card lettering as reference. Using the show card template as a reference for the letter
Yeah, I
forms.
just provided that because that was the only one that's pretty much old. I don't like to give out current teachers work, so I gave that out, but I had shown Eliza Holiday's that's taller. Hers are different. So these are just a reference, and then we come up with our own, whatever we want to do. And I
Okay,
know that
from
I
that.
like tall and narrow, but everybody has their own thing. Okay. So next
Sounds
time
good.
we'll go over these letters with brush. We'll get some tips for brush, and hopefully I'll have a better handle on my curves by the time next month rolls around. And actually it's not as late in the month, so I think maybe it's 3 weeks from now. I'm not sure, I'll have to double check but I think it's 3 weeks. And we can play with the you can play with different pens, and then think about what you might want to do for the drawn letters later. Maybe after the brush lettering, we could play around each on our own with folded pen or whatever we want to use, Kemper tool, whatever we want to use. And I have to say that Kemper tool takes a lot of practice also. And when I took Nancy Hayes Hill's class, I knew I didn't have time to practice and master that. So I used a pointed pen. I outlined them and I filled them in, and they looked pretty good. So I was pretty happy with them. So we each use whatever we find works for us. And our goal here is to just come up with something we like. And San Diego, maybe we'll have another online exhibit. Some may want to.
Good.
Great session.
Thank you.
Sorry, I had to plug in my hotspot. Excuse me, can you repeat that?
I just said it was a great session and
Oh.
great instruction. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
So,
Yes, thanks, Kristi.
yeah, so play around with this and see what you like and start thinking about drawn letters. And we hope to see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Kristi.
Bye.
Be well.